Welcome, everybody, to another live webinar here at Aptora for Aptora and RA Tax and Accounting. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Today's exciting topic is going to be vendor credits. Now, at some point, everybody's going to need to deal with vendor credits. And at first, it all seems pretty easy, and maybe it'll turn out to be easy, but I'm hoping you'll still learn something in the short video on vendor credits. First thing I want to do is examine our vendor workflow. We can see that it all starts when we enter a bill or when we enter a purchase order. Generally speaking, we would always want to enter a purchase order. If you haven't met me, then you probably haven't heard. I'm a purchase order freak. A purchase order is a permission slip. It might as well say new permission slip to buy something. That's what the menu would say right there, but that would sound unprofessional, wouldn't it? So it's a purchase order, an authorization to purchase. But don't forget, it could also be a request for pricing. You could create several purchase orders, send them to several different companies, asking for prices, and accept or utilize just one of the three purchase orders. So sometimes people ask if we have a request for pricing feature. Yes, we do. It's a PO. A PO hasn't been accepted yet. And then the POs that you decide not to use, you could do whatever you want with them. You could keep them, just close them. You could delete them. I would keep them, close them. So it should start with a purchase order. Certainly a purchase order would be needed on anything that's not recurring. You would not put a purchase order in for rent, utilities, telephone, internet, things like that. You would put a purchase order in for Carrier, Lennox, American Standard, Johnstone, Granger, R.E. Michael. Sorry if I left anybody out that we're friends with. But all those different vendors, when you buy things from them, you would put in a purchase order. If you are wanting to buy a tool from eBay, put in a purchase order. That's right, even if you're the owner. Believe me, what's in it for you? You're thinking, I'm the owner. What's in it for me? There's a lot in it for you. Better communication, better record keeping, better bookkeeping. You want to buy something from Amazon, and I'm guilty, put in a purchase order. If you work in marketing and you want to buy stamps, put in a purchase order. So a purchase order goes in for everything. That's the first thing I want everyone to get used to. After the purchase order is put in, then we would receive those items into inventory. But we could also receive items and enter a bill. It does both at the same time. I prefer that you receive items next and then enter a bill for the received items. So it would go like this. We'd go to vendors, new PO. Eventually the item comes in, we take the packing slip and we receive the items. That might as well say enter a packing slip. And then at some point we have to pay the bill. They probably will send us a bill through the email or through mail. And then we would enter that bill for received items. So we're entering the bill for items we've already received. And then eventually we pay the bill. And that's the flow. And we've been through that. There's other videos on that if you're interested. But let's talk about a vendor credit. Maybe we've already paid the bill, but now we have a motor that's failed under warranty, or we have materials that we didn't need and we want to return them. And we might do that if it's something that's non-stock. It's just something that we don't want to have, or maybe we have too many of them. We want to return them. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Get rid of that. I could keep this up and we could just click these. You'll notice the credit list is down here. That's vendor credits. I'm going to close it though. So we'll go to vendors and we will create a new credit. There's that ugly pinkish color. I'm surprised people don't ask me more often, why did you guys do that? That was done a lot of years ago. The reason why is because it looks so much like entering a bill. It was actually a feature request. One of our users said, could you put a weird color on that or frame it with red or do something because those two look so much alike. And that's what we did. So we made it that kind of ugly color there. By the way, if you're not aware of it, not to digress, but under Preferences Appearance right here, or Edit Preferences Appearance, there are some options on changing your color scheme. When we enter a vendor credit, we can start from scratch here, or we can go from other places. As you probably know, in Total Office Manager, there's this flow that we always talk about, the flow. And usually creating something from scratch like this is the hardest way to do it because typically you can come from something and save yourself a lot of keystrokes. But I'm going to do it from here the hard way. And we'll pick a vendor. And maybe that's Granger. Now, this message is a preference. It can be turned off. It's saying you have dealt with them before. Do you want to make a copy of the last transaction? No, I don't. I'll start from scratch. But I could have said yes, because it's possible I'm returning the thing that I bought last. So it may not have been a bad idea. And I could have always deleted that information if it didn't work out. It wouldn't have hurt anything to delete it. I'm logged in right now as Ashley Adams, and she's been assigned to a warehouse truck 1. You may not use that feature. You may not have it turned on, but you want to double check and make sure you have the right warehouse picked. Now, if you call your vendor, right, and there's the phone number, right click and go into the vendor's contact log and enter a note. And then under topic, I might have something like parts order, or I might have return. And return what? And whatever you can put in here is helpful. The subject is like the subject of an email, though. It shouldn't be any more than a handful of words. But it could be that you're returning the widget. Love that widget term. Called to return the item. And again, more details, please. Save and close. You're doing somebody a favor, including yourself, by the way, because they might want to talk to you about this. They might say, James, did you return the widget? Yes. Why did you return it? Would you please read the contact log notes? Oh, yeah, okay. I just thought I'd call and ask you. I put contact log notes in meticulously. Please just check those. So you're keeping them off your back. Now, the vendor might give you some kind of return authorization number, and you could put it there. And then you could put in a memo, something. And if you're using our stage feature, you might have stages here. So it might be stage 1, and you'd have a description typically, but stage 1 could be that you called for authorization and you got it. And stage 2 could be that you've entered the vendor credit, or maybe they're combined into step 1, stage 1. Stage 2 could be that you've actually delivered it to the vendor, or they've picked it up. Now, when they pick it up, they'll give you some kind of packing slip, some kind of piece of paper probably. And we want to use that. We want to document that. But that's how you can use your stages. Now, your next step is to pick what you are returning. Now, we've been talking about items. Keep in mind, we have an expense tab here. So what if you called AT&T and said, my internet's been really slow lately? And they said, oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. We're going to give you a $50 credit. Well, you could go in and put in a vendor credit for AT&T. So you would pick your internet account or whatever account you use to track expenses for internet. And let's just call it communications. And then I'd put in a memo explaining that the internet speed's been slow and I'd put in the $50 credit here, and I doubt it would be related to a job of any kind, but it could be related to a department. It could be related to marketing. It could be related to an asset, a vehicle, or some other asset. If it is, you'd want to pick it, such as you call Dell and they're giving you a credit on the computer you just bought because it doesn't have something that they said it would have, as an example. Then you would go pick that computer. And that way, you're tracking the financial activity for that asset as well. So this credit, this vendor credit, can be any vendor, anybody you spend money with. But we're talking about items for now because that's the most common. What we want to do then is go find the item that we're returning. And what if it were serialized? That'd be fine. You will have to pick the serial number. So if we want to do that, I think I will too. In fact, I'm going to pretend like I'm returning this right there. And then I'm going to return a serialized item. We'll do lookup. Here's our lookup form. I'll clear the vendor selection. Well, I don't have to. I could go Granger. And I'll do all trucks or all warehouses. And I'll do serialized. And I do have one. Wasn't sure if I had one we could use. So we'll select it. Now the software wants a serial number. This one's easy. There's only one available. One to return. Now, where do those serial numbers come from? Well, obviously, if you're not new to Total Ops Manager, then it's obvious to you. But in case you're not aware of it, these are serial numbers that came from purchases that we made. So you're not allowed to type in a serial number here. You have to pick one. And the software understands you only have one to pick from. If you don't find it, that's probably another webinar. But if you don't find it, there's a problem. We have to go look for it. We have to find out what happened. There it is. So we are about to return one inventory item. Inventory part is the type. And we're about to return one serialized item. And we're going to get a vendor credit of $554.40. Now, if you need to adjust the cost, you can do so. On the inventory part, it may be wrong because it's looking at your average cost, and they may say you paid $88.42. I just made that number up, $88.42. Now, if you haven't seen this, the software says if you go to this item and look at the estimated cost field, it says $94.90. But do you want to change it to this $88.42 that you just entered? Generally recommended. It's generally recommended because you get this same message when you do a purchase order. But in this case, it's probably not a good idea because $94.90 might represent more accurately what we pay. So $88.42 might be a bit of a fluke because it was this purchase for this from this vendor. So I'm going to say no to that. Now the serialized item theoretically should be correct. It knows exactly what you paid based on the serial number. So that should be the amount we're going to get. Now, it's quite possible that you don't know the amount. It may be that where you work, you have a lot of volume. Your job is to just simply create vendor credits. You're not sure how much it's going to be. Those fields can be populated later. That's all there is to creating the vendor credit. Now I'm going to go back to the expense tab and delete that line item. And I'm ready to return these two items. I need to double check my date. It may be that this will take effect today, but it may be tomorrow. If that's the case, it's not too big a deal, really, because it's all in the same month. But I like to get it right if I can. So if I'm doing this today, but I don't think I'll get my vendor credit on the books until tomorrow. Then I'll pick tomorrow. I want to be sure I have the right warehouse up here, but ultimately the warehouse that matters is the one that's down here. As you might be aware, this is your auto fill down. Whatever you put in this area, it'll automatically fill in these line items. And that's handy when you have a lot of line items to put in. Maybe, for example, you're returning 25 different things from a job, and you need to pick a job for all 25 line items. So you might go to the lookup form, you might build a list of 25 things, and then when you click OK and add them to the list, the customer job might be empty. But if you were to go pick that customer job here, then it'll automatically fill down. But we've also been kind enough to allow you to autofill after the fact. So you can come in here and autofill after the fact if you need to. Be sure to pick a department if it's applicable. That's easy to say. Applicable, okay? Yeah, if you need it, pick your department. Why is that important? Because we want departmentalized financials. So if we are returning these, and this activity is specific to a department, and it may not be, but it will if there's a customer job being selected, because that customer job belongs to a department of some kind. So be sure to pick your department if applicable. I've never had trouble saying that word except today. Also, you have an opportunity to pick a work order. If you pick a work order, it has no effect on your financial statements, but you might find it handy to pick the work order because it may pertain to a certain work order or a certain person. You might give a work order to a person for them to return these items. Let's say that you want your plumber to return the water heater and to return this no-hub soil pipe. Then you might create a work order. In fact, you should, because a work order is an authorization to work. It's like a PO. Authorization to buy, authorization to work. So your work order is an authorization for them to work. You should create a work order for them, and you have an opportunity to pick that work order here. If you right-click, there are some other shortcuts. You can go into the items. You can look at the work orders that were selected, look at their history, look at them, etc. So you have some options here. We're going to go ahead and hit save and close. I'm going to type in 3 letters there to make that easy to find it. An item row does not have a valid item. You must correct this. Okay. Well, as I was talking, I put a number in that 3rd row there, and it thought that I was starting to add a new row. So I have that fixed, save and close. Now, for extra credit, on the accounting side of things, you've affected your financials. You have affected your balance sheet. You have created an asset, which is a vendor credit. So you have an asset, a vendor credit now, which is good. Also, you could have affected something else depending on the items that we have. We could have affected our cost of goods sold. We could have affected equity. But one thing's for sure, our balance sheet will show the vendor credits. Depending on how you set up your books, it could be through a reduction in accounts payable. You could also have vendor credits. But typically, it's just a reduction in accounts payable. So we're actually reducing a liability, a current liability called accounts payable. But this did have an effect on our financials. It also would have an effect on job costing. If any of our jobs paid for those items, we've relieved that expense from those jobs once we create the vendor credit. Now, your job to be done. You might be the vendor credit person. You're maybe the warehouse person. That's it. That's all you know. It's over. Somebody eventually is going to deal with the vendor credit. It's a good idea to occasionally visit the credit list and see if you have any unapplied credits, meaning credits that you haven't used. You haven't received money for them. You haven't applied them to a bill. So any that are not void, I have that selected here, are being shown. You can see the original amount. You can see the remaining amount. And we do have some that are unapplied, including the one that we just built right here. Now we'll deal with it. We'll go to vendors and we'll go to pay bills. And on this list, we're looking for a Granger. If it was a large list, I have 55 bills to pay. I would use my filters to help find this particular bill that we're paying. Now I put my initials in there just so I could come find it. And let's see here, vendor. I could go Granger. So there's different ways to do it, even filter by department. We have sorting capability as well. All right. So now we have an opportunity to take a credit. You'll notice that these are bills right there. So where's our credit? Well, let's go pay something. That's the easiest thing to do is we're going to pay Granger. So I check the box next to a $4,500 bill. The amount due is $4,500. The amount to pay is $4,500. It's offering no discount opportunity because we're not paying within terms. We're really late. Otherwise, we would have got a discount and it would have auto-calculated the discount for us. Down here, it says we have available credits of $697, and it knows that because the vendor that we've selected is Granger. So once we picked a Granger vendor, it went to look to see if there were any discounts available, any credits available. We're going to hit the Set Credits button, and this form comes up showing us the credits that are available. The software auto-selects the credits. There's a preference to not do that. Over the years, someone didn't like that, and they said, I don't want you auto-selecting. I want to do it myself. Okay, it became a preference. So we'll uncheck that one, and that leaves us with the credit that we just created. It looks at the date of the credit and suggests that's the date that we'll use to apply the credit. You can edit that. So if it turns out that the credit needs to be applied on a different date for bookkeeping purposes, like you might want to go back in time and you might want to have this credit apply to last month. Why? Because you haven't yet paid sales commissions on it. You haven't paid quarterly bonuses. You haven't finalized your financial statement, something to that effect. So you could actually go back in time and have this affect last month and not this month or a future date. But that's why that's there. And that's an example of some of the complexity of the software. That does add to the software's complexity, doesn't it? But you could leave it alone and never care anything about it. But it's there for the advanced people that care about those little details. I'll hit save and close. So now it says your total available credits are $200. Now it shows that we have a $4,539 bill to pay, and the amount to pay is only $4,041.85. That's because it's taking the credit. Our next step is to find the right bank account. There's a preference to pick it for you. If we were taking a discount, the software wants to know what discount account to apply it to, and that's a preference in case you don't want to pick it every time. But if you want to force somebody to pick it, then you would leave the preference blank, empty. Payment method, you could create a check or you could create a credit card payment. If you haven't used this before, this is nice because you might be using a company credit card to pay this. And that will create a charge, a credit card charge. And a lot of people aren't using that feature, but under banking, we have a whole credit card management system. Very few companies take advantage of this for some reason, and you really want to use this. It works very well, and it will provide you much better bookkeeping, accounting. Finally, your payment date. You can pick a different one if you want to. Then you can click Pay Anew so that you can pay another vendor. I like to pay one vendor at a time. Or you can hit Pay and Close if you're finished. Generally, though, I like to pick all my vendors, pay them all at once. Then I do Pay Anew, and I do another vendor, and I just keep going until I'm finished. A few more things to say here. If you have checked a lot of boxes, you've applied a lot of credits, you've done a lot of work on this form, and then you realize there's a bookkeeping mistake somewhere. Like, for example, somebody entered the item receipt incorrectly, and then that created the bill, and it was incorrect, and it's just pennies off. Maybe they transposed some numbers, and you need to go fix it. If you hit the refresh button, let's say you leave this form up and you go fix it. So you go to vendors, you go to receive items, or you go to the bills list, and you fix the bill. If you come down and hit refresh, you're going to lose all your work. So what you want to do is you want to save. Hit the save button. Then go fix the bill. Fix the credit. Fix whatever you have to fix. Maybe it's to put terms. You realize you didn't have terms on the bill and it wasn't offering you a discount. Whatever you do, go fix it. Come back here and hit refresh. And you'll notice everything is still good, even though it refreshed. And when I hit refresh, it would have picked up the new corrected information. Again, that's kind of advanced, but there are people that need that. Now, if we right-click on this bill, we have some options. Don't forget to right-click everywhere. Some places it's obvious, but some places it's not so obvious. Right-click wherever you are. You never know what you'll find. This will allow you to go to that bill and fix it. So that way, you notice the bill's incorrect. Go to the bill, fix it up, fix up whatever needs to be fixed. Come back here. Be sure you've saved your work. Hit refresh. It'll pick up the newest data. Or maybe you want to shortcut into the vendor. We'll open up the vendor history. You'll see every check you've ever written, every PO, every item receipt, every bill, every credit. This would allow you to easily go in and see what credits are out there. Maybe, for example, you were surprised that other credits weren't offered right here. So how would you get an answer to that quickly? Right-click, go to the vendor's history, go to the credits tab, and this will show you the bills and the credits. You'll also see any adjusting journal entries that have been made that might affect this vendor. You'll see general journal activity, all your debits and your credits, part number item aliases, credit card charges, even phone messages. Maybe they called and left a message. So don't be afraid to right click. There are usually some handy things on a right click. So I'm ready to hit pay and close, and that will generate, in this case, I'm going to generate a credit card charge, pay and close. Oh, select a credit card account. Now it did that because I switched from a check to a credit card. So it wants to know, what credit card are you using? I got to know these things. Using my Visa card, pay and close. Now, if we go to banking, manage credit cards, credit card charge list, it'll be in this list. We can search by reference number, or we can search by amount, vendor, date. It will be in there. And now we've got a credit card charge. And when we eventually go to pay the credit card, we can do so. We can pay a credit card right here. And then when we get the credit card statement, we should be viewing those online every few days, by the way. We'll reconcile the credit card statement. And again, we typically do that every few days. Get online and do a partial reconciliation. At the end of the month, we finalize our credit card reconciliation. So that's it. We used a credit. Now that we have used the credit, it is said to be closed or finalized. It'll have no remaining balance. And you can see it has a remaining balance right here. So what's up with that? Well, I left that form opened and it didn't refresh automatically. Now, depending on my preferences, it might have refreshed automatically. It might refresh in a couple of minutes. But occasionally, you can hit refresh to get the latest info. And there it is. All right, so the vendor credit is done. Now let's right click on the vendor credit. We have an opportunity to edit it. Got to be careful doing that because at this point it should have been all good, but we could edit it. We could delete it, make it go away. We could void it. Typically, nobody should have deletion permission. We can go into the history of that vendor credit. Now, if you're a longtime user of Total Ops Manager, you know there's history everywhere. So there's even history here. We can see the history of that credit. And there's not much to say about it. It was used on this date to pay this bill, or this bill rather. I should change what I said. It paid this bill, which was dated this date. That amount, date applied. That's where you can see where it was used. If you need to make an adjustment, you actually have an opportunity to do that too. So you could unapply the vendor credit here. And then you could reapply it somewhere else if you needed to. If you find out that you should not have taken the vendor credit, or you took it in the software, but the vendor did not apply it, and then told you you're going to have to use it some other time, then you could come in here and unapply the vendor credit. And if I do that, then it will be out there to be used again. And how would I use it again? We just repeat the process that you already saw. If you needed to memorize a vendor credit, you could. You can memorize most any kind of transaction in the software. You have some shortcuts to get you around. Remember our rule about 4 mouse clicks. You also have form preferences, which would allow you to decide what columns you want to see. Most of the time, there's a lot more columns than this. But that's about all we need for here. And now the vendor credit is done. So remember, if we ever need to investigate a credit, we would first go to the vendor. And we would go into the vendor's history and we would look at the credits. And that's the best place to start. If you know exactly what you're looking for, then you could open up the vendor credit list and go find it. If you need to edit it, you have that opportunity. You can delete it. That's my last choice. You can void it. That's my first choice if you wish you had never put it in. If you realize that it went to the wrong bill, then you can adjust it. And now those items have been taken out of your inventory. When you created that credit, they were taken out of your inventory, and that could have reduced your cost of goods sold. It could have reduced the job costing expenses, the cost of goods sold on the job. It all depends on how your accounting is set up. And then we took that credit and finally applied it to a bill that we were going to have to pay anyway. And that credit is now done. So that is all there is to say about a vendor credit. Now, you saw us go through the whole process with items. Just a reminder, we could have easily done this with items bought online from Walmart, Amazon, eBay. It could have been a credit that Dell gave you, AT&T gave you. If anybody offers you a credit, by putting in a credit, so they offer you a credit, that's their word, right? So they say, we'll give you a credit for $50. We're real sorry about that, ma'am. You really want a record of that credit. So before you're all finished, you would do new vendor credit and go find that vendor, and maybe that's AT&T, maybe that's the gas company, and you'd want to put that credit in. That way you never forget about the credit. Maybe they never give it to you, and you'll always have a record of it. And you can put in the contact log note why they offered you the credit. We saw that earlier. But now you have a record of the credit, and if they don't give it to you, you have a reminder of it. That's really important because sometimes we get on the phone with people and they offer us credits that we never use. And one final reminder, go to your vendor credit list once in a while and look for credits that have not been applied, because it's easy to forget about these credits. You'll want to be sure you use them. And if you did use them, but you forgot to do it in the software, then you have to go back and edit that payment so that the payment reflects the credit that you took. And that's real common. People will go in and pay a bill. They'll actually pay it for the amount before the credit and maybe wish they took the credit, or they might have paid the bill minus the credit, but they forgot to apply the credit. They have to go fix it. So to do that, you have to go back and fix the original bill or go back and fix the payment, whichever applies. Okay, now you are ready to manage vendor credits in Total Office Manager. Were there any questions about what we've seen? Okay, that concludes vendor credits from Aptora. Thank you very much.